Lukemeyer and all of our Republican colleagues on the Small Business Committee for leading this important discussion this evening. And this is very important. Madam Speaker, the Democrats' radical multi-trillion-dollar agenda is bad for America. It just is. And we can all see it. And the voters can see that too. In fact, while we're here right now, there's still voters lining up just down the road in Virginia. They cannot wait to vote for their next governor. And it's a race that's currently classified as a toss-up, but it appears to be going very, very well for the Republican candidate. The reason this is so noteworthy, the reason everybody in the country is watching this, the reason that everyone is so excited that it's a toss-up election is because this is in a state that President Biden won by 10 points just several months ago. And there's simply no conclusion to draw other than that the Democrats are leading our country down the wrong path. That's what the polling says, and even the mainstream media outlets have had to report on that in the last few days. It is the content of this tax and spend agenda, and not just the cost, that is especially dangerous for American families and our economy overall. You just have to think about the harmful effects the Democrat bill is going to have on our local businesses, and many of whom, by the way, we all know are already operating on shorter hours due to the current labor shortage. But specifically, the legislation that is being debated and pushed through even this week is that the Democrats want to increase OSHA penalties, increase penalties on small businesses. That's a tax. They want to reduce the pass-through deduction. That's a tax. They want to increase the regulatory burden on small business owners at the worst possible time. You know what that amounts to? A tax. They want to make the child tax credit pay the same whether you are working or not, which, what will that do? Logically, it will exacerbate the current labor shortage. So let me repeat. The Democrat bill, in spite of what they're saying, will definitely increase taxes while prices are soaring. It will increase workplace penalties while companies are trying their best to get back to work. And it will encourage people not to work while the job market struggles and our supply chain is slowed down due to a lack of workers in these critical positions. There are nearly 32 million small businesses in the United States. About 350,000 of those are in my home state of Louisiana. They're our main employer. They employ more Louisianians than any big company or the government. This is the mainstay. This is the lifeblood of our economy. You're talking about deli managers and barbershop owners and bookstore owners. You name it. Small businesses across the country had to fight tooth and nail to survive the COVID-19 pandemic. The last thing this Congress needs to do is make it more difficult for these businesses, but that's exactly what our Democrat colleagues are trying to do. As for the rest of the bill, well, they're still working on it, they tell us. We heard today there may be some deal on prescription drugs. Who knows? We'll have to see how that goes. Been lots of promises made and broken here last few weeks. Meanwhile, the Democrats are still trying to include amnesty in the spending bill. What that has to do with the reconciliation, we have no idea. Hopefully the parliamentarian on the Senate side will put another kibosh on this. But they want to include tax breaks for wealthy New Yorkers and just a bunch of terrible ideas. I have to digress for just a moment and talk about this amnesty problem, because not only will that be another burden on our small businesses, not only will it really take jobs away from law-abiding citizens, but you have to consider the insatiable appetite that our friends on the other side of the aisle have for amnesty. We spent about 13 hours in the Judiciary Committee about 3 weeks ago working on their effort. The Democrats pushed that through to graft amnesty onto the spending bill. And after all those hours, near the very end, late at night, we asked them if there was any end to this appetite they have for amnesty. We're talking about maybe as many as 10 million illegals who have come across the border. And we brought a few amendments, and we've talked about this in our conference, but we said, gee, if you're going to grant amnesty, and you all have the votes in the committee to move this through, we understand that, but we just want to see if there is any limit on who you might include in amnesty. So we brought an amendment to the bill and said, what if someone is a known MS-13 gang member? Surely you would want to exclude them from your amnesty plan. And I'll tell you, Every single Democrat on our committee voted that amendment down. Of course, every Republican voted yes. So then we said, well, wait a minute. What if somebody is a convicted sex offender? Somebody's coming from another country. They're a convicted sex offender. Surely, you would not want to include them in your amnesty plan. Every single Democrat voted no on that amendment. So I brought an amendment. I said, what if someone is a convicted criminal? They're convicted of DUI, driving under the influence of alcohol and drugs. Terrible crime, as you've all said in your speeches in recent years. It kills thousands of Americans every year. It maims hundreds of thousands. Surely, if someone has been convicted of at least one DUI, you would not want to include them in your amnesty plan. Every Democrat voted it down. So we tested a little further. Okay, what if they have 2 or more DUI convictions? Every Democrat voted it down. So I went to 10 or more DUI convictions. Would they be excluded from your magical amnesty plan? Every single Democrat voted no on that amendment, every single one. There is no limit to what they want to do with this. The one thing they do know is they want to spend trillions and trillions of our tax dollars before we know the score on all this, before the actual text of the legislation has even been read. They're ready to roll. Democrats have a mere 3-seat majority in this House. We have a 50-50 split in the Senate. They are acting as if they have some sort of big majority to radically transform the country, as they keep telling us. And when what they have presented is the most partisan, most expensive legislation package in the history of this country, using the slimmest majority possible, and before they even tell the American people what's in it. Make no mistake, a toss-up election in Virginia is just a taste of what's to come for congressional Democrats in 2022 if they do not immediately ditch this ridiculous spending plan and harmful government overreach. I yield back and I just say this. Today we have a battle that comes down to competing ideologies and agendas. It is now free market capitalism versus big government socialism. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman, I'd like to have just a little minor discussion here.
Sure.
You made a couple points there with regards to some of the discussions you had with regards to amnesty. Did one of the questions that you posed deal with the $450,000 payment that the president is proposing to all of the folks who come here illegally? Was that voted on or talked about at all in your discussion?
I so wish that proposal had been on the table before we got out of that particular hearing, because we certainly would like to have heard about that. But if you add that up, you're talking about perhaps $1 million per family and $1 billion in cost overall, more cost to the American taxpayer. And by the way, that little payment that the illegal migrants would be given by the American taxpayers is more than we give to Gold Star families, persons who've been lost in the line of duty, as you know. It's more than the victims of 9/11 that they've received for their pain and suffering. And of course, those separations are permanent, not temporary.
So we could be giving a $450,000 payment to an MS-13 gang member, is what you're saying?
That's exactly what it means. And convicted sex offenders, and multiple DUI convicted felons, and anybody else. They've included them all. There is no limit to it at all.
And it doesn't seem to bother them that they're going to spend their own constituents' hard-earned tax dollars and give it to an MS-13 gang member to do $450,000. Holy smokes. Blows you away.
It is incredible. You can't make this stuff up.
Yeah.
I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for his